All right, welcome to Exceptional Circumstances for Exceptional Learners. I am Rebecca Muller, and I am here tonight with Council for Exceptional Children's Discussion Board Master. This is David, and I was able to connect with him through the robust discussion that occurs through Council for Exceptional Children. So after looking at different threads and even posting some of my own questions, there was a person that really stuck out as being a true community member and a leader. So David is the first one to comment with rich dialogue, experiences, research. He has the facts to back it. And it was just so exciting when we actually were able to meet one-on-one. I got to read a lot of his articles because he's kind of spread in all different places. So it is with great pleasure that I introduce him to you tonight. And for those of you on Facebook, feel free to throw some comments in the chat and we will bring them into the discussion. So David, welcome. How are you tonight?
Thank you for having me. I enjoy talking to you and others and Councils for Exceptional Children. If you're not a member, you need to become a member. It's a great way to collaborate and communicate.
For sure, yeah. All right, welcome to it. Sorry, okay.
Children, if you're not a member, you need to become a member. It's a great way to collaborate and communicate.
For sure, yeah. Okay, we are on a delay here on Facebook Live. So I apologize for that. Always fun with tech things. I just wanted to make sure that I had access to the chat. So you got to hear us double because it's that important. So anyway, but yeah, so it is a wonderful way to collaborate. But let's talk a little bit about your background and what brought you to the field of special ed and what you're currently doing.
Okay. Well, I'm David. If you have any questions, call me that. I'll start back, I'll try to be brief. I like to talk. I tell every student, teachers love to talk. I wish students got paid to listen as much as we love to talk. So it's my humor. I got into special education because my first year as a teacher, I thought I knew it all. I gone to University of Illinois, got a master's. I just conquer the world in regular education. And I found I had a lot of trouble with classroom management, and I really bombed. So I talk about this. If you can't talk about your failures, if you can't own them, if you can't grow from them, then you're not going to reach your potential. So I failed. And I thought, why can't I make this work? Why can't I get this to succeed? So I went to special ed. I thought, no, I want to work with kids that have behavioral problems. I want to make this work. And that's how I fell in love. And anyone that's taught special ed knows you get an instant gratification when you get to see a change in behavior. And it's so different from regular ed. And I love regular ed, but it was my failure that pushed me into special ed. I wanted to make this work. I wanted to make kids succeed. Briefly, about me, a couple other things. So I have been in education for over 20 years. I tell everyone routinely, I probably have taught more behavioral disorder kids and special ed kids than probably any teacher alive. I've seen over 3,000 kids because I'm in a short-term facility. And so 3,000 of some of the most troubling and difficult behaviors you can imagine, from abuse, neglect, mental illness, drug abuse. So I have a great deal of rich experience with probably everything you can imagine, from being a non-reader to a post-high school reader, all kinds of behavior, and a lot of sad stories as well. Briefly then, because one reason I'm here, I'd like to talk about how we can all be researchers. I do have a doctorate, and I teach for Fort Hays State University, and really my strength is probably strategic leadership. But I get to talk with teachers all over the world, from special ed, regular ed, to college. So I get to talk to a lot of people. I get to see a lot of things going on. So I'm pretty up on what's going on within the world. And then I do research, and I do publish regularly. And so I get to talk to researchers all over the world. I have South Korea to Poland, the U.S., China, and I think I can also offer advice on research methodology that can be used at the classroom level or even at the college level. And I will end with here. I'm always available. She said I'm on CCEC's discussion board. People that want to begin personal conversations with me, I do that regularly. I keep in contact. People need help on publishing, on research. They have questions. I work year round. Please email me. I like to talk to people. I like to help. I like to learn from you because I learn a lot. So reach out to me if you got questions. Okay, I will be a resource far and beyond, or with Rebecca.
That's amazing. And that's really the what I want to build in this community as well, because I like to think that you can never have enough resources. And it's really nice when you can depend on a person that really has rich experiences and understands the work. You can get very lost on just researching and looking at things on the web, and there's just so much that sometimes you just need that personal connection. And that's one of the things that I've loved the most about connecting through Zoom. Now there's Clubhouse, and being able to have those rich discussions. And sometimes just it's enough just to not feel alone, because I think in special ed, especially, you're dealing with different things, and you're kind of on an island depending on what program you're a part of. And that can be isolating at times. And something you said about just hearing the stories, and when you're emotionally involved and you're dealing with kids that have complex histories, the emotional toll is a lot. And so it's really great to connect with and people who understand that can support that and be of value. So what you do in connecting is just an invaluable, or can I say indispensable thing. And I applaud you for that. So let's talk a little bit more. So you work in a juvenile detention center, right? And I imagine there's a lot of turnover. So what does that IEP process look like? What does it look like to get their goals? And how does that work as a teacher?
Well, I work at a short-term facility, so we have rapid turnover. So I've seen 3,000 kids in 15 years, and trust me, as many of the non-special ed have just as much complex, if not worse, than special ed. Probably never identified, never attended school, never has a consistent history. So it's also given me a great deal of trust in testing data. So if I pass on to everyone, I do a case study for every student that walks through my door, whether you're special ed or regular ed. I don't believe anything that's been said before. And by that, I don't mean people are lying. I just mean data becomes stale. So I had a student that was tested a year or 2 or 3 ago. That gives me a baseline. I honor the data. I read it. But that student could be a far better reader today. They could be better in math, or they could have regressed. So every student gets a case study. We do math, reading, and behavior. And we do formal testing. But as any teacher knows, I also have, this is probably the only worksheets we use. We have some very small packets that give us an idea how a kid can do at different scale levels in 4th, 5th, 6th grade reading. And so I use the qualitative component. We have some kids, every kid do a small amount initially. And so everyone gets a full case study. Everyone gets a qualitative review. And then from there, we determine what's our objectives and goals are going to be. And the tough part is we have to take every student, whether you've been suspended or expelled. We have 10-year-old dropouts before. We have kids that cannot read. So we do a full case study. We use qualitative data, and I'll also caution you. If you do all that, you still might get it wrong. Sometimes a kid will not show what they know. They're used to not showing what they're knowing. Some kids just will not open up, will not try. They don't put forth the effort. They've always been wrong. So then I tell everyone, you might be wrong. But often a kid will give you a glimpse of what they're capable of, and that's where we can zero in and try to get them to where they need. So everyone's on an individual plan because it's so different.
And, I think we've known for a while that an indicator for success is relationships. And in a regular school setting, you get a year to make that relationship. I've found that in my experience, by the time you get back from like Christmas break, the kids know you. You start to get there, and you're constantly on this like a roller coaster of getting to know each other, loving one another, disagreeing, just like a family, right? But I have to imagine that that is much different in this setting. So how do you maintain that relationship? How do you get in there and establish that trust right off the bat? So what are some of the strategies and things that that you do?
Well, I preach this. And I write. I think the first thing to building relationships is to step back. I call it routinization and skeletonization. Skeletonization and routinization. I'll explain it briefly. And I think it makes such a difference. Adverse childhood experiences, trauma, trust issues are real. And you can't just approach it by good morning, good afternoon, please, yes, sir. And I think that all goes into, and I shake that in there every day, that we're the adult in the room and we manage our behavior. I start with routinization, and that just means the kid knows what to expect, when they walk in. And I believe for kids that have trust issues, you skeletonize that. That means there's a predictability. The class always starts out the same way, always proceeds to the next activity the same way. You ask for help the same way. We model it and we practice it. And that's a problem in special education and regular education outside of school. Outside of the detention center anyway. When a kid doesn't know what to expect or what to predict or what the teacher's going to say or do, predictability is traumatizing. So I've taken that off. They don't have to walk in and think, well, who am I going to be? What am I going to do today? They always know what they're going to do and how it's going to do. And so like class ends the same way every day. It doesn't matter if it's ending early. And so that creates a condition for relationships. So I first recommend, if you do not have a skeletonization where you have all those little components of how you move through the period, where your first 10 minutes are this way, your next 5 minutes is this next way, then you're going to have trouble. So after that, a kid now knows, I know what to expect, when to expect, and I enforce with all staff 100% consistency. We answer questions the same way. We offer assistance the same way. If you have trouble, we answer the same way. After that, then we can move into, I try to get to know the kids. I try to do, if there's something I can do to help them out. I say you go above and beyond always being the adult in the room. So it doesn't matter if they threaten you, they're mad. It's always an extreme politeness. And I'll add one comment, and I can certainly answer more. So I think skeletonization and routinization, lastly, so we practice this. I practice how to raise your hand, how to ask for help, when to ask for help. How do we ask for help? How do you get your pencil sharp? You have to model it and practice it. But the last thing I would say, extreme respect, and I'll give you an example. In my classroom, I'm not Mr. Coker or Dr. Coker, I'm David. I call every kid by their last name, Mr. So-and-so and Mr. So-and-so, and good morning and good afternoon and good day. And I take that time. And so I do think extreme respect helps, even in the face of kids aren't used to that. And many kids are distraught by it initially. They've never seen such nicety, such politeness. They often think maybe we want something, or there's a game, or it's a gimmick.
That's interesting, because I've noticed that in general in society, if somebody is overly nice or really happy or like, hi, how are you? And calls you by your name, there's this feeling of, what's that person after? Like, the fact that that is how we're conditioned to think, I think is very sad. I did a workshop when I was in Alexandria City, and it was a 4-day over a weekend, Thursday, Friday, a Saturday, Sunday. And that first day is just seeing this presenter who's just over the top and so happy. And you're like, this is so awkward. And by the end of it, the whole idea was high trust, how to create high trust in a group. And by bringing the mood up, eventually by midday Friday, we all were with him. But it took a collective group of adults a long time to start to zone in. We paid attention because it was different, but nobody kind of understood why he was so over, like, enough is enough. Like, just give us the information and let's go. But eventually it elevated us to realize what the purpose was to make sure that we felt welcomed. And it's awkward when somebody says your name because we don't hear our names a lot. It's, you talk and, but like just by saying, like, David, I appreciate you. Like something so simple that we just don't have time for. I really think it matters. It matters so much. And it's something so simple. It's not another curriculum. It's not another thing to do. It's just being mindful in the moment of just saying hello. Hello, it's good to see you today. I'm happy you're here. And one of the debates recently that I heard is this idea of telling your students you love them. Is that appropriate or not? So I would love to hear, because that does bring up a lot of childhood adversities, and it could bring up a lot of feelings. So I would love to hear your take on that.
Well, I mainly do older kids, so most kids would find that awkward at the older
Sure.
upper grade levels in middle school or high school. As you all know, if you've been around the block from K through 12, elementary boys and girls love to hold your hand. They want to sit next to you. They'd like to have lunch with you. That would be a reward. Then they get to middle school and eating lunch with you is a punishment. That's how you punish them, So I think age appropriate that I often joke with my students in high school and middle school, and that's what I mainly have. Is I always say, I don't have any babies. I got all young adults, and that's empowering. Say, no, you're all young adults. I don't have any babies. I do sometimes say they're my babies, and I joke with, no, you're all young adults. Young adults do young adult things. You're like me, okay? And so I think it's age appropriate. And then only thing I would caution is, at the end of the day, we still want kids to learn and respect us, and they certainly love there, but I think you have to be careful that. Sometimes people think you love them, then how can you punish me? How can you discipline me? How can you tell me I've done something bad? And so I'll segue into that. I have lots of conversations with kids about it's okay to fail. You should fail. If you're not failing, why are you going to school? Why are you in my classroom if you're not missing any questions? I don't need to grade anything you're not. So I also preach failure, that, failure is where we get to where we need to go. And if you're not failing, then you probably don't need to talk to me. I mean, what am I doing here? And so that resonates with kids when you talk about failure and how to fail. And so I bring up my failures too, but I think that really wins kids over. And then you talk about love. Well, I think there's a platonic, love that I would talk about with the older kids. Younger kids, I think kids want to feel valued and cared for. But I think you got to be careful. Everything's by the kid, isn't it? In special ed.
For sure. Oh, for sure. Completely. And knowing background, because there's a lot of like, that feel good, almost toxic positivity out there in the education space. And I think it's an important conversation to have, and that within your own building and knowing your kids to establish that. And I like the fact that you also said that the routines and how you address questions, that's across your staff. Because I also feel like kids in a regular setting, they are having to switch each class based on who the teacher is and what they can say and what they can't say and where they need to be stressed out, where they need to relax. And like, that's a lot of a mental load for a child. And I know I talk a lot with my parents, and I'll be like, oh, so-and-so had an amazing day today. Like, well, they came home and they were a mess. Because we have to remember that if they're really putting forth that best effort and they're trying so hard, they need release at some point. They need to be able to breathe. And I think just the way that our schools are structured, I think sometimes we don't give kids that. And so no wonder why that last class they're going off the walls. Um, so and I love, like, yes, the value. I think, knowing that you're a valued part of whatever group, community, classroom, cohort, making space for that, and we were talking a little bit before about curriculums, right? There's all these new SEL curriculum, social emotion, and a webinar a little bit ago, and I'm listening and I'm going, that's just what it means to be human. Why are we being told the steps to be human? I thought that's just what but like there's this idea, it's almost like we've become, in the education space, we gather the data and we look at the data and we look at the numbers and we look at how to achieve that next, block up. And I think some ways we've lost that human side of what it means to be a teacher, which is what a lot of us went to teaching for. And I just think that's a thing that I hope that we can start to celebrate a little bit more.
I'll be brief on that. And I was teaching a student at Fort Hays a couple of years ago, and she's talking about relationships. And she said, I've just had my best year ever because I started establishing relationships as a high school teacher. I'm very successful, but late in her career, she changed. And I can work on my change. So like if you go back 10 years ago, I was a drill sergeant. We can use mathematics. If you waste 5 minutes of every class period every day, you might as well get out of school 3 weeks early. You deprive your kids of 3 weeks of school. So I'm a taskmaster. I'm big on my kids shouldn't get out of school 3 weeks or weeks early. So I made sure to make use of every minute of every day. And I still believe that. But now I'm not a drill sergeant. Okay. I have a routine. Kids know what to expect. And you can imagine as an adult, say you walked into school tomorrow, two brief stories. So say you walked into school tomorrow, you didn't know what class you're going to be in, what you're going to do, what you're going to teach, how you could ask for help if you needed something. We don't do that for adults, but sometimes we expect a child to walk in and not know who, what, where, when, and just be okay with that. So very disconcerting. So with that, you have to teach routines and talk about like raise your hand. Well, that's got to be specific. Raise your hand, wait to be called on. I'll come over to your desk, talk in a low voice. We take turns. That all needs modeled and taught. But then how do you make that human? Here's a couple of ideas, very heavily research-based, and I can share this with you. Part of it is, if you're a thespian and you're acting out what you're teaching, kids are very engaged. I act out everything. I want to keep moving my hands here because I want to show you what I'm doing and where I am. So I act out everything. And when you start acting out everything, and I don't care if you're acting out, I act out nouns all the time, person, place, and thing. Oh, you can act it out. Preposition. You want me to act out anything. I mean, anyone wants to throw something at me, I'll get up. I can't dance. I have no music ability, but I can act it. Kids look at me. They're with me. And I'm frequently going back and forth and check for understanding. They got to be answering, talking to me frequently. Something else you can do, start drawing. Start doing visual representations. Everyone can draw. And if a kid can't draw, they probably can't see it. And so you talk about making it human, and it's kind of fun. You start acting it out. You start adding humor into it. Some kids say I should be a comedian. Some kids groan, but that's okay. And then I draw all the time, and I'll use that as an example. I couldn't draw 5 years ago. If anyone can't draw, tell me. I'll teach you how to draw. I took a seminar. Everyone can draw. And it's a big difference when Bart Simpson appears on your paper and says, hey, you need to capitalize your sentences. Or the dog says, hey, what are we doing here? Don't we need a name? It's amazing how kids are like, I'll listen to his dog or his cat or his caricature, but I don't know if I really want to listen to him. So think about thespian and think about drawing, and anyone can do that. And if you need help, talk to me. I'll have to turn this sideways, get backwards. You tell me what you want me to act out. I'll get it for you.
And that's true too. I mean, some of the things that we do for adults, I one of the best things in my graduate class is one of my teachers actually put stickers on our test but she only did it for a few. And even the adults, you're talking, second career, whatever. I didn't get a sticker. It matters. Like they notice the little things, because it makes them, feel special. And I think that doesn't go away just because you're 8. And I think we tend to be like, oh, they're, in the higher grades, they're not going to want those things. And, it's something that takes a little bit of extra thought, a little bit of extra time, but, it makes that person feel like you did go that extra little bit for them. Um, so I'm curious, what was your change from 10 years ago to now? Was it your position? Was it just your experience? Like what made you from a taskmaster, this is the drill sergeant way, to being more in your natural state, which it sounds like you're having more fun. So like what was the transition?
Well, you get in a routine and you get in a rut. So my routines worked. Being a taskmaster worked. A lot of kids unhappy they'd never worked, but most kids got with it. And probably been 5 or 6 years ago, and I'd had some personal tragedies while in my life. Some people had died, and went through a lot. And I liked kids. Most kids liked me. But this is a paradox. I've always had kids call the detention center and said, "Can I get locked back up, or can I go to school with you during the day?" Okay. And I know some of you are thinking, "Oh, wow, you never want to be in kid jail." I have a lot of kids, "Oh, I hope I don't get out before the holidays because I want to be here for that special event you're doing." So, what we take for granted is often not what a kid takes for granted. We're just not in their shoes and in their eyes. And so people think, "Oh, that's horrible." Oh, no, they're asking to come back. Or they're saying, "Please don't release me." So I would say some of that happened, but then I use as an example, I did a case study, and we're talking about research here, so I did an individual case study, and I had a kid, and you thought he had a cognitive disability, and that's what he acted like. He wouldn't show it, wouldn't answer me, sometimes provocative and rude, but that was who he was. And so we're kind of at, okay, we must just be where we are. He's not going to really work or do anything, not going to show me anything. And I repeat over and over, if a kid's never shown something, you don't know where they are. So I can place him. I think, well, I've never seen anything. If you asked me today, at that time, I said, "Oh, he must be a terrible reader. I must not be good in math," because never saw it, had no evidence, wouldn't really do the test. So I said, well, it's not working for this kid. And this is why we do research at the individual level. I said, well, I don't have anything to lose. He's an 8th grader. I'm going to give him all 3rd grade material, see what happens. He's not working anyway. I mean, you can't fail beyond failure. So I thought, well, I'll take a chance. And not what teachers in my districts of the world over want to hear, that you're not teaching their curriculum. So, and I'm a big curriculum guy. Okay, so curriculum just went out the window. So I'm going to give him all 3rd grade stuff. Well, you know what? He was a 2nd, 3rd grade reader. That's how he had covered for years, by acting defiant, acting like he didn't care, acting like he was dumb, acting like he couldn't do anything. And he had passed for years. He was an 8th grader. Well, that little act there won him over. That, he could actually do something, but he didn't want to, kids can't raise their hand in class and say, "Look, I feel dumb and I can't really do this. I'm at this level." And I talked about, I feel dumb. There's meta messages behind everything, even for adults. People don't always say, "Well, Rebecca, I can't figure this out," because they're afraid in the back of their head, the meta message to everyone is, "Well, he must be dumb. Well, he can't get it. Everyone else can get it." So I really push, when you go on your journey of research, look for the meta message. What are they saying? So I took a chance with him and paid off. And I thought, you know what? We're going to have to just do whatever every kid needs. I don't care if they're an 8th grader, if they're 1st grade. We don't get 1st graders. I don't care what grade level they are. We're going to do whatever it takes. And so I had teachers say, "Oh, well, he's in geometry." Well, yeah, but you know what? He can't do 4th and 5th grade math. Or he's supposed to be in biology. Well, yeah, he reads at a 3rd grade level. He needs to learn how to read. And once I went to the kid, I'll also say our discipline problems just melted, because you weren't fitting that round hole into the square peg, which would probably fit there. I got it backwards, the square peg into the round hole. And it's amazing. It's amazing. So I chased the kid to his level, and it changed me. And so I'm much more aware of where's the kid, and you got to meet them where they are.
And isn't that just so true, that you can read all the theory you can go through all of the what should happen. But at the end of the day, you have a child who has an individual experience that, it takes a lot more effort to get to know them and to meet them there. I think in some ways, with the pandemic and being able to work a little bit more one on one through the computer screens, I feel like I've had a lot more, um, not just great relationships of hi, bye, whatever, but like kids are able to open up a little bit more because they'll text me in the chat within class privately and be like, I don't get this. Whereas I think that same kid, if we were in a class of 20, might just find something else to do or go to the bathroom or not engage. And
the
so,
meta message behind the message.
yeah,
You have to
absolutely.
figure it out, and it's so tough.
And I think just being in a lot of different co-taught classrooms, people become frustrated. Well, the kids never hear, and how are they going to learn? And I think even as kids start to trickle back in our hybrid, and we're trying to get them back into a routine, because a lot of kids take their classes from their beds on their laptop, right, to try to get them back. I think we're going to have to spend a lot more time just building that trust and that relationship and that community. Um, and honestly, I don't know how ready our teachers are because I think our teacher community also needs that, right? There's a lot of meta messages right now with our own teaching staff of burnout and not wanting to kind of sit down and plan for next year because it's difficult and we're not sure and the unknowns. And so I love the fact that you really combine that research aspect. You don't have to be a researcher in a doctorate field to be doing the research. The research is the classroom. And whether or not you're and writing it out and getting it published, I really love that idea that every teacher is a researcher. So can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yes. Talk about research. I'd say if you went back like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I did some research, but I was too busy teaching. I imagine everyone who's too busy teaching. I was talking before we started about the idea of abandonment. All your school district keeps saying, we're going to do more, 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 more. We're not going to get rid of anything. You find a way to make this work, okay? But you do these extra 10, 15 programs, write up all these extra 200 reports. And so we need abandonment. We can't do everything. But we can do research every day. And I'll give you an example. So I'll tell you a simplified method, just one of many. Please email me if you want more. You can think of HIRA, H-I-R-A. All good research starts with just a hypothesis, a guess of what's happening. So I'll give you a couple examples to work through. HIRA. So H, the hypothesis could be, Rebecca's not completing assignments in class. So you have to make up a hypothesis. We've all done this. We probably don't do it enough. So we can say, well, you know what? Maybe Rebecca can't read it. It's too complex. Maybe Rebecca doesn't want to read. Maybe it's right after lunch. Maybe she's tired. You know what? Maybe it's every Monday she can't read, I find. Okay. So we got to make a hypothesis about what's going on. And then HIRA, and this is Norton's another person, but like you want information, but this is my method. Then you need to do inquiry. We need to research what our hypothesis is. I think she's not reading to grade level, and that's where we find out. And maybe we'll have to read outside information. Many of us don't read enough outside information. Now, before we get to the next one, where we're going to want to move to results. But before we do results, I'll caution you, come up with alternatives. Not alternative, alternatives. And that just means I can't say, well, Rebecca, I think she's just rude and doesn't like school. So I'm going to yell at her every day, or I'm going to send her to the office every day. Maybe she is. Maybe she is upset. Maybe she doesn't like me. Maybe she's not a nice person to be around. And she's tough to be around. But we have to consider alternatives. What else? Like I mentioned earlier, the kid doesn't want to look dumb. He doesn't want his friends to say, oh, look at that dummy. Look at what he's going on. Alternatives. So we have to come up with several possibilities that might fit. Then we need to come up with our results of plan. We need to decide what are we going to do, and then you go to analyze when you're done. And so after this, you got to analyze. You got to figure out, where am I? I'm going to caution you. This is why most research fails. You need to have short-term goals, short-term and long-term goals, but you need to say after a day, 2, 3 days, but you need to let it run its course, 5 days. Most all problems will get worse initially. Kids resist. They want to maintain the status quo. So hypothesis, you inquiry, you then results, and then you analyze it. Then you start back over. You might have to modify. You might say, oh, you know what? It's because Rebecca can't read this. I need to give her something she can read. Or, you know what? She can read everything else I found out. She just can't do the social studies. You know, I think maybe she doesn't like the social studies. There's so many answers. It's almost always a combination. It's never just linear of just one thing. If it was one thing, that would be awesome. We could just fix it. And then you go back. Plan, do, study, act's very similar.
Yep.
But if you calm down, you make a hypothesis, often it'll be whole class, you come up with an answer, but then you don't just get rid of the results in one day. It's probably not going to work in one day. I'll say one more thing about this, and I'll go back to you. It's almost always going to get worse. Anyone that's tried to modify behavior, whether it's your own kid, whether it's in a classroom, whether if it's a toddler, he's like, well, I threw a fit 10 minutes last time. I threw a fit 15 minutes this time because he told me I'm not going to do this. Same thing. Well, I told you you're going to do this today. Well, you know what? I didn't do it yesterday. I bet he's bluffing me. He sees the meta message of, he's probably lying. He's not really going to do this. And so it almost always gets worse. And of course, ultimately, a lot of times, your inquiry missed the point. You didn't come up with the right alternative. And I do think that search for research and meaning and patience really makes a difference. Yes, and it's we can call it action research, but you have to have a hypothesis. You have to have some research. It could be talking with friends yourself. You have to have some type of results, and then you have to analyze where you're going to go next, because you're always going back to the hypothesis, and you're just cycling through. This can be a lot of fun. It can be a game changer. It can be it can be as simple as, you know what, the kids were really noisy when they walked into class today. I'm going to make this better. Why? Well, you know what? I wasn't at the door. I let this kid talk to me over at the pencil sharpener today. Tomorrow, I'm going to try this and this. And so Kaizen, have you heard of Kaizen? Mm-hmm. I believe little steps make a big difference. So you might make one little tweak, but then you got to track it and monitor it. And that's what a lot of times we think we don't have time to do. Yeah. And if we make time to do that, our job gets easier and better. And then we have more time to do it even more. It's amazing how it expands like a virus. It just multiplies. It takes over your class. I talk frequently about we want things to take over our class that are positive.
Sure, absolutely. And I know working in elementary school, taking that time to model, like especially when I have nightmares still of putting together the reader and writer workshop, because I had A to Z reading levels. I had kids with a lot of different needs. And that was the thing that I just focused on. And I wanted to get right in with the instruction and make sure, well, if the kids don't know how to go around the room and actually get to those stations, none of that amazing planning and, deep dive and curriculum and making sure that all of the rhyming sounds went together, it didn't matter, because I needed to take time to not have academic demands and just model and have the kids feel successful in that structure. And we literally did that. We sat and went around the room and did our things, and we talked about what worked and what didn't work and what we can do to make it better as a collective. So it wasn't just me saying, you need to do this right now. And, because that's how I started, and I was miserable. And I was like, I'm not going to make it to Christmas. Like, this is not, I chose the wrong profession. What am I doing? And it was with the mentorship, with the support of someone else who said, well, why don't you try this? And I was like, I don't know, I can't do it. And she helped me in that class that day and modeled it. And I think saved me from running the other direction and being like, I'm getting a job in an office. It's easier. I believe so much in the mentorship, the support, because like I had a certificate, I passed all the tests. I was not prepared to walk into a classroom.
You,
And I feel
you,
like we need to spend more time, you know, preparing our teachers because the only way to get prepared is to have experiences. So maybe it's talking to one another in a Zoom format now. You know, uh, just the mentorship programs I think can be so much better because if you can't reach the kids, classroom and management is always an issue for our beginning teachers because if they can't reach the kids, they can't teach them, but we don't spend a lot of time explaining what to do besides like, the basics of like, this is where the book bags go. And there's this like intuition that a teacher develops after seeing kids over time and figuring out what works, what didn't, and what worked last year might not work this year with this group. And that's okay. And I think we beat ourselves up because it's okay to constantly be flexible and changing. And I would love for that to be more of the norm that, it's okay to ask for help. And if it's not working, it's okay. There is something else somewhere and someone somewhere, probably in your school, might have the thing that you're looking for. But we don't often go into each other's classrooms. We don't often say, I'm having a really hard time with this kid and I don't know why. Because sometimes you just need to be removed and somebody else to watch and see, well, I noticed this or I noticed that. Because you're human, you can't see it all, right? I think that another piece comes to mind that especially with special education and paraprofessionals and teaching, you need to use your team so that you can figure out if you're doing a research, like what you're going to focus on and what you're going to change and what works. And that it's okay that we don't all have the answers all the time.
you bring up so many points. And so, and to keep flowing with how you can make this into research. So, I talked about hypothesis, inquiry, results, analyze. It's not complicated. You don't have to think, well, I got to get out of the book. I've got to know how to do logistic regression. I'm going to do it qualitative. Believe it or not, teachers do almost all this kind of mathematical and even what's called qualitative all the time. So, other ways to expand on what you're saying. So, an iterative process. Start asking lots of questions to yourself. Well, why is Rebecca doing this? When is Rebecca doing this? Where is she doing this? If you ask why over and over, why is she doing this? Why does she get out of this? Why? That's a part of your research is constant diagnosis. Lots of it's going to be wrong. You hinted at lots of it's going to be wrong. You're just wrong. Big thing, own your failures. I talk about this, probably one of the first concepts I learned that changed me, and it was tied together was first, behavioral changes a process, not an event. It's not going to be, Rebecca calls David up because she said a problem in the third hour, and I say, do A, B, and C. Bye. And wow, magic solved. I mean, that wand just fixed it all. That kid came in. I often tell people when I consult, you know more than I do about this situation. I might be wrong. I'm going through your perspective. So you have to help me. So it's not just going to be overnight. We like easy answers, but often they're not the case. Often there are hard answers that take hard work, missteps, back and forth, back and forth. I talk about asking lots of questions in research. Another way to easily research is, and I can't say enough, hypothesis. Why are they doing what they're doing? Deconstruct it, break it down. What are the steps? That's good teaching. Good teaching is also breaking down what are the steps of where this is going wrong. And I'll add something you're talking about, like in your classroom, about how you were going around on transitions. And, it's so important to value students at role playing. Role playing is extremely powerful in teaching routines and expectation. And so the big idea, of course, on behavioral, sometimes we think kids know what we're talking about and they see our perspective and they don't. And you talk about role playing. So I often did what people say, oh, it's hokey role playing. I can't believe you do that. We had a role playing on how to ask for help with this kid. How do you throw away a sheet of paper? How many of you have students get up, sharpen their pencil in the middle of your conversation with the class? Someone else is crumpling up the paper and throwing it away, and another one's moving their books. Oh, they don't know. They're supposed to listen and be quiet for a minute. They don't know. How do I ask if I need a sharpened pencil? Oh, I'm going to hand you my pencil. I'll let you sharpen it when I'm done talking, because if kids are and they're trying to hear me, good luck with that. But how do kids know what we're doing unless we're going to actually role model it and play it? I also often have little cards with meta messages behind kids. Like, I'll have a kid say, drum on your desk, and I'll put a message up. Everyone watch me. We can no longer concentrate. So sometimes we'll have to find an alternative. Or other meta messages of, I'll talk to teachers about a kid will say, I don't know anything. I can't do anything. Meta message might be, I'm trying to escape the task. Meta message might be, you know what, I'm not good in math. I don't want to do this in front of kids. So, but that goes back to, we can constantly research if we can analyze why. And everyone can do this all the time. And, you say, we need to talk to outside people or outside sources. We need to have a broader perspective than just ourselves. I haven't seen everything. I can tell you problem after problem. I might have a kid tomorrow. I don't know what to do. And just because what I did with a similar kid doesn't mean anything here. So it's okay to be challenged.
Yeah. I mean, if that's not something you enjoy, that is education every day, every moment. It's just different. And I think that's some of the joy. But I would like to open the floor up. We have a few more minutes here. We have some participants here, so I don't know if any questions are coming up or experiences that you would like to share. Feel free to join us. Give that lovely wait time.
If the participants would like, you can also share your histories, your stories, if you'd like to add or subtract to what we've said. And I'll encourage people, debate, offer disagreement with something I've said or Rebecca said. It's very powerful. We often forget disagreeing doesn't mean you're disagreeable. And it's a powerful way to learn and refine ourselves. So I tell every student in every class I teach at the college level, but I also remind, disagree with me, attack my ideas. That's how we get better ideas. So say, well, you said this, but I think this would be better. And I'm going to honor the answer. Great strategy I use every day. I never disagree to open up. I try to show agreement and honor and value what someone said. So offer disagreement or say, you know what, I'd like to do this differently. Okay. Powerful. And it's always welcoming, because that's where I'm going to learn a lot too, when I see that other idea.
Yeah. I think sometimes we're, especially in the education field, we don't want to offend or, disagree. And it's, when I think about it, I always frame it in the idea, especially within the classroom, of like, is this getting in the way or changing the path of the student's success? Because is it just like a personal thing that like I can kind of like deal with, or is this something that I really have to speak up? And I think as the years go on, I'm getting a little bit more vocal, but I would definitely say in the beginning, because I didn't have that experience behind me, I just had like hunches, because there is that intuition piece in education that we don't really explore. But like I have a very specific student that is coming to mind right now, and I needed a lot of support in knowing how to reach her. And it was one of those things. I mean, I had scattered research. I was trying everything in every way. And the only way to really describe it, I'm like, there's static. When I'm next to her, I hear there's something that's not okay. And it was very hard to like put that onto paper, right? So I'm like, not like work refusal, distractibility. Like I had all of those indicators, but in my, like, I knew that there was something else. And I just couldn't get to that next level. And so I was told, focus on the academics. That's not for you to fix. Focus on the academics. And, you know, it was a struggle because it was so hard to show the academics because I knew that there was more and going on. And I think schools don't have a lot of supports for behavior. I know like we had a outside consultant that was a behaviorist and like could come on Tuesdays at 1 o'clock, which didn't work in our schedule. And I just would love if we would, you know, spend more of our investment in personnel and kids as full people than just trying to look at test scores or look at, you know, gains in academics. There's more to life. You know, we talked about in the beginning some of the curriculum. Why do we teach the things that we actually teach? Like what is actually important and essential? And I'm hoping, and I keep saying, like, the pandemic was a great chance for us to really sit down and think about that. And I think people are just kind of like, you know what, it's going to be easier just to go back to what we were doing and maybe, you know, put a little bit more in. And I love that your idea of abandonment. You got to let some stuff go so that you can add the good stuff. And it's okay to let some things go. It's okay to, you know, these ideas, it might have worked for a while and there's going to be and people who are very attached to that. It's okay to let that go. Change is good. It is work. It's hard. So yeah, this was just fabulous. I feel like I could talk to you all night. This is awesome.
you we talked about research, a couple more ideas. So intuition, you're right, is often just wrong. And I've written about this, but I talked to all the teachers about this. This was a big breakthrough too. Most everyone on this discussion board, you, me, everyone listening, most all your colleagues were highly successful in school, loved school, went to school, valued school. And if you didn't early in life, you did later in life to get through college. Many of our students don't have that same background. And so often we compare unfairly students to what we did. And we default back to our experiences over any new research or any new ideas. So often you have to reject what you think your kid's going through. It's not your experience. I was a nerd. I loved school. I wanted to go to school every day. I wanted to book for Christmas every year. And my brothers didn't, okay? And some of my brothers loved schools. Some of them barely made it through. So be careful on your intuition and your experiences. Don't compare kids to how you did. We've all done it. I did for a long time. And on this, on research, I talk about QDA. To be strategic, question, debate, have alternative. That means you really attack and reject what you think you know and your assumptions and belief. And there's a key value for any organization, absorptive capacity. It sounds like a big word. And we can jettison that absorptive capacity to say, you have to be a learning organization. And often we're just not learning organizations. I'm going to do what I've always done. I remember how it was when I was in fifth grade. I remember how my son was when he was in fifth grade. I remember how my brother did. Last year that kid had this problem. That's not being strategic. That's living in the past. We're going to have to go to the future. And that means absorptive capacity means your ability to learn and absorb outside perspectives and information and change your diagnosis and ultimately your life. And question, debate, alternatives. It can make you feel uncomfortable. It can make everyone in the meeting feel uncomfortable. But then you have to make everyone be heard, else you have no diversity if only one or two of the same people talk every meeting.
Mm-hmm. And what's the Pareto's principle? 20% of the people do 80% of the work, or, and like you can dissect that across all kinds of things throughout life. But I think it's because some people aren't encouraged. They haven't been inspired to state what they think or feel because it's going to take more time, or somebody else might say like, oh, you're always the person that talks at the meeting. I just need to go home. And there's that like societal pressure. So that's
Or you're
why,
always negative.
right. And I always think that that's why I love this. I really think it's important to find your own communities because it doesn't, just because you work in a district and have a department, it doesn't mean you're all going to see eye to eye, or sometimes too, if your experiences are too alike and you get something different, you're not going to know what to do. So you have to reach out and see beyond your own bubble. Which is why I love the willingness to connect. I love the discussion boards where people can ask questions. The organizations like Council for Exceptional Children. This week, I in my state, there's an amazing parent network because I know as a parent, like there's no rule book about that. And if you throw in some special needs on top of all that, it's really tough. And we don't have to do it alone. I think there was this idea, the individual and the family, and we all are going to figure it out and suck it up and make do. And I think that there is more of a collaborative community feeling out there. And if it's not, I know that's what I'm trying to build. So I just thank you for being here. Thank you to our members in the audience. Welcome you to continue the conversation. Um, and that's all for tonight. I am just once again just grateful and thankful for you, David, and I hope that we can collaborate on something else soon.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you.